can you use logic to dictate morals? No, you cannot. Can we use empathy and logic together to create some form of morals? No, we cannot. It can't be done. You have to assume that laws of logic transcend the human experience. And then after you assume that, then you can start to work on what kind of ethics and morals you want to put into play. The problem with that, however, is that most non-theists don't grant that the laws of logic are transcendent to the human experience. What that means is this. Me, as a human being, do I get to determine what is and is not true? If the answer is yes, then I can create my own laws of logic. If the answer is no, then I do not get to create my own laws of logic. If the laws of logic are found in man himself, then man has the right and the autonomy to create laws of logic as he sees fit. Now this lady, I don't know her name, posted a video saying that, well, I'll just let her talk.
What if I told you that you can create moral systems using an empathetic, logical basis that doesn't rely on because God says so? Food for thought.
Yeah, it's some really interesting food. Not food that I would eat. I'm kidding. I'm joking. All right, problem number one. You can create moral systems. Who gets to create them? Is it me? Is it you? Is it a group of people? Is it, I mean, how far do you want to extend this? Because a group of people decided to make some moral claims back in the 1900s, and we don't really like what they did. It didn't turn out very well. And we judge them for it as if there was a transcendent moral law. But if we get to create a moral system using empathetic, logical basis, what does that mean? What is an empathetical, logical basis? Because empathy and logic don't go hand in hand perfectly. Not that they're mutually exclusive, but logic, if my wife comes home and she says, oh my gosh, I've had such a bad day, logic would dictate that I tell her, hey, if you want to have a better day, do X, Y, and Z. Empathy would tell me to give her a hug, say, how's it going? Things will get better. So you can have logic and empathy at the same time, but those two don't go together in a sense that they can create a moral structure for how we ought to behave. Because you can apply logic to answer the problem of someone having a bad day, or you could use emotion to answer the problem of someone having a bad day. How you do those together, I don't know. I would want to know what she thinks about that, because I'm not really sure. And again, this goes back to the problem of, is man the final point of predication for what is and is not moral? If man gets to decide what the laws of logic are, what is and is not moral, how we have empathy, that's another problem, is empathy is different for different people. And if we get to decide what is and is not empathetic, then we can get to decide what is and is not moral. When you base your foundation, when you build your ethics with logic and empathy, and then you work your way up to how we ought to behave, if the foundation is flawed, then it doesn't matter what you do along the way, because ultimately it all means nothing. If the foundation is man himself or herself, if the basis, the foundation is man, then man can conventionalize whatever he wants. And on convention, I say that it is empathetical. Is that even a word? I don't even know if that's a word. It is empathetical to euthanize people over the age of 70. It is empathetical, theoretically, to steal from your neighbor. It is empathetical to steal from stores. See the problem here? When we as a people get to decide What is ethical based on empathy? Different people have different understandings of empathy. Different people have different interpretations of how to apply the laws of logic. For example, God is real, therefore it is logical to follow him and obey the Bible to the best of our ability. Would you agree? Should we do that? Ought we do that? If the answer is no, then how are you applying your laws of logic? You have to assume that man in himself has the power to use laws of logic correctly. This empathetical logical basis that doesn't rely on God, are we going to get a committee of people together to determine what we should do? What is what is logical? Who gets to decide what's logical? If God does not exist, and if man is the final point of predication, that is, man gets to decide what is logical, what is empathetic, and how we ought to behave, then all three of those is just another way of saying that morals are whatever we feel like at any given time. And if that is true, then you cannot say that man ought or ought not to do something. This goes back to the question that all presuppositionalists are known for. By what standard? What standard are we going to employ to say what is right and is not right? If you say that logic dictates what we ought to do, then I would say, whose form of logic? How are we going to apply this laws? The words are hard. How are we going to apply this logic? To what end are we going to employ this logic? What's your anthropology? Do humans have meaning in this worldview? If they do have meaning, where does that meaning come from? Does that also come from logic? Because if so, then it could be logical to get rid of all elderly people, get rid of the disabled people, get rid of people who are a hindrance to society. That would be logical. Would it be what's this new word I learned? Empathetic? No. But again, if God does not exist, why ought we have empathy for other people? Why ought we be empathetic? Why ought we care what happens to other people? If we want to employ logic and empathy to create our ethics, how do we know that man is doing that correctly? How do you know that you're employing the laws of logic the correct way? How do you know that you're being empathetic toward another human being? If it's up to man to decide, if we are the final point, and we get to say what is and is not empathetic, or if we get to decide what is empathetic, then we get to decide what is right and wrong, and we're right back to square one. God does exist. He does tell us how we ought to behave. He does tell us what is right and wrong. He does exist, and he's going to hold all men accountable to what he has revealed. He has told us, do not murder, do not steal, treat others with kindness and respect, because every single man, woman, and child, even the unborn child, is made in the image of God and is worthy of dignity and respect. That's not based on the laws of logic. That's transcendent to the human experience.